Alright, guys, so look, I like Canada. People there are great, but they have made one grave mistake tying the economy too tightly with the United States. And now they are living in a state of eternal blackmail. We are now witnessing a next level drama. It's important to realize what kind of person Trump is. He is the king of transactional deals, he's the lord of punishing the dependent. And now here's a new deal for Canada. You better take our punishments and smile, because if you don't, we will crush your economy. Now sign on the dotted line and don't forget to bow down as well. Now, Trump has gone off the reservation. Just a few hours ago, Trump issued a big threat to the Canadian economy. Ontario just announced a 25% surcharge on electricity. You are not even allowed to do that. We don't need your cars, we don't need your lumber, we don't need your energy, and very soon you will find out. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when you don't diversify your trade. You get treated like a trash can on the sidewalk. Trump is fully weaponizing the US consumer market to achieve his outcomes. Now, will it tank the US stock market? Yes. Prices are obviously falling. Will it hurt the American economy and spike inflation? Yes. But at this point, Trump doesn't care anymore. Trump is officially moving to double the steel and aluminum tariffs on Canada. It's no longer 25%, but it's now a whopping 50% coming into effect March 12th. Now, Trump obviously wrote this back a few hours later, but we still need to talk about it, talk about the effects, because it's quite brutal. A 50% tariff would most definitely crush Canadian exports into the US. The steel industry is a business with razor thin margins. US consumers would most definitely reduce their consumption of Canadian steel if it happens. This situation underscores the fact that Canada can't stay in this limbo forever. Even though Trump rescinded the order, this is still economic blackmail. They are being treated even worse than China. So, what is Mark Carney, the new Prime Minister, gonna do? Trump is gonna declare a national emergency on electricity from Canada's retaliation, and we have no idea how far this could escalate.
If they want to try to annihilate Ontario, I will do everything, including cut off their energy, with a smile on my face. So, and I'm encouraging every other province to do the same. Quebec, Manitoba, BC, we all have to act in unison. Out east, they rely on our energy, they need to feel the pain.
It's not just Canada's steel industry on the line, but a major sector that's facing total collapse. Trump wants to increase tariffs on Canadian auto parts on April the 2nd, and this would permanently shut down the auto manufacturing business in Canada. But of course, if they become part of the US, Trump will remove the tariffs. So it's either become the 51st state of the United States or get brutally punished, and I really don't know which is worse. This is an urgent wake up call to Canada. This economic situation is not going to end. The Canadians need to work with other major power blocs. They need to urgently start trading with the EU, China, Asia, and the BRICS. And we've been saying this for over 3 years now for countries to cut away excessive dependence on the US consumer market, or you'll end up like that. Trump's threat might be insane, but it is not without any teeth. The US still holds a lot of sway over Canada's auto industry. Now, while their exports to the US have been dropping, it's still over a million Canadian made vehicles a year. It's a major industry that supports a ton of jobs and a lot of livelihoods. It's really a tough decision for Canada. If they bow down to the US, there will be concessions. After that, you can bet on it. Trump will still impose his baseline tariffs of 25% and reciprocal punishments on Ottawa. But if they stand up for themselves, they could face a painful collapse of the auto sector. Here's how much is at stake. The industry employs more than 125,000 people with an additional 370,000 jobs spread across other connected businesses. Now, this sector accounts for 8% of all manufacturing jobs in Canada, which is a very significant amount. US tariffs are enough to push the country into recession, so this isn't a joke. Provinces like Ontario will get decimated. Vehicles and motor part accounts for almost 20% of their total exports. And if Trump goes ahead with his tariffs, Ontario could feel the brunt of the economic damage. But if Canada doesn't stand up, they will forever be joined at the hip with the US economy. and there are still 4 more years of Trump. It might be auto parts today, but what if Trump demands a bigger discount for Canadian oil tomorrow? Or maybe he wants Canada to sell their gold production at a big discount next year. Now, we have no idea, but the road ahead looks really dark, and we are dealing with Trump. These possibilities are not impossible. We must appreciate the difficult position Canada is in. Now, if Trump raises trade barriers on cars, this has the potential to deindustrialize the country, at least in the short term. From 2020 to 2023, Canada managed to attract nearly $15 billion worth of investment. And this includes companies like Stellantis, plus US automakers GM and Ford. And remember Trump's end game. He wants to shift production back to the United States. A big tariff on cars coming from up north could take away all incentives to set up a factory in Canada. Many companies like Toyota and Honda also manufacture cars in the country, and the big reason is to export them down to the US. The Canadian market is much smaller compared to the US consumer. And that's why Trump is so confident that Canada will cave, because the short term pain might be just too extreme to bear. Now, will this hurt the US economy? Of course it would. Car prices would soar to the moon. And if you live in the US, car prices could rise by up to $12,000 thanks to the tariff. Now, I don't know about you, but a 12 grand increase is enough for any family to cancel their purchase. So, will it be good for the US consumerist machine? No, it won't. But Trump's fully prepared for a US recession. Or maybe he just doesn't care anymore. He's 1,000% sure. He's sold on the idea of tariffs being the holy grail of everything.
Are you worried about a recession? Maria Martirosyan asked you and you kind of hesitated.
I'll tell you what, of course you hesitate. Who knows? All I know is this: we're going to take in hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs, and we're going to become so rich, you're not going to know where to spend all that money. I'm telling you, you just watch. We're going to have jobs, we're going to have open factories, it's going to be great, and the plane is landing. And thank you for a lot of good questions, okay? Thank you very much, everybody.
Now, we all know tariffs don't work that way, but for Trump, he believes he will rake it in. So punishments will come for Canada and the world. Trump is either playing 3D chess and we're all stupid, or his ego has completely taken over. Now, Kanye has mentioned how Canada's tariffs will stay until the US shows respect. But maybe the only driver left is the US stock market. As a result of Trump's tariff war, the S&P has lost over 8% in a single month. The recent escalation in Canada caused it to collapse further. Perhaps the only way is for a US recession to happen that will crash his opinion polls. Despite his tariff war, Trump's approval ratings are still astoundingly high. So he has widespread support and a mandate to continue his policies, which means he's ultra serious about his reciprocal tariffs on the world. The US could see enormous boycotts not just from Canada, but the world at large. Many American brands are already getting hammered. Trump himself just promised to buy a Tesla after the share price collapsed by over 15%, which personally I find insane. The sitting US president is using his influence to prop up the share price of his best friend's company. How crazy is that? But beyond that, many other US companies could face a wall of resistance from foreign buyers. As Trump raises tariffs, he also increases the cost of production within the internal US economy. Domestic goods made in the US becomes more expensive, and domestic demand is already on its last legs. Consumers are swiping more and more of their credit cards just to stay afloat, which means Trump needs foreign buyers to keep buying American goods. And here's a big statistic for you. Nearly 30% of revenue generated by the S&P 500 companies come from non-US sources. In other words, nearly a third of business is dependent on foreign buyers. It's a big reason why we are seeing the US stock market crashing. It's not just China's DeepSeek that's crashing US growth companies. There's a big inherent fear that the world is shunning US goods thanks to Trump's trade war. It's the exact same situation as China dumping US bonds. If you are someone who lost their job thanks to Trump's trade war, would you be inclined to buy a product on the shelf made in the United States? You probably won't. And this brings us to the Achilles heel of the US consumer. Now, when we talk about China's collapsing real estate market, everyone knows and everyone loves to connect to lower consumption in the real economy. And guess what? They're absolutely right. It's a big reason why Chinese consumption is still depressed. People feel poorer, so they spend less. But the same situation applies to US consumers as well, but it is linked to the stock market. Stock ownership of US households are at an all-time high. Over 40% of people own stocks or they have a portfolio. And if the wealth effect is true for China, it is also true for the US. If stock prices continue to collapse, this will do a number on people's heads. Even a 10 or 20% crash is enough to make you feel poorer. And the last thing you want to do is to head out and spend, especially if a recession is coming, courtesy of Donald Trump. So Canada has to choose, either start diversifying their trade today or eventually become a de facto arm of the US economy. They could be forced to join Fortress America to block out the Chinese trade. But a quick question here, who do you think will be the leader of the fortress? It sure as hell won't be Canada. You can bet your last dollar it'll be the US calling the shots once again. And remember, the entire administration doesn't believe tariffs are inflationary. It doesn't matter what we think, but what Trump and friends believe.
If the president does roll out the 10% tariffs that he says are coming on China this week, the 25% on Canada and Mexico, how much do you think they will impact what Americans experience? The Peterson Institute says it'll cost households an additional $1,200 a year.
Look, we have the experience of President Trump's first term, where the tariffs did not affect prices, and it's a holistic approach that there will be tariffs, there will be cuts in regulation, there will be cheaper energy. So I would expect that very quickly we will be down to the Fed's 2% target. So I'm expecting inflation to continue dropping over the year.
Well, there you have it. According to Besant, inflation is all in our heads and it's going to continue to drop. Well, if it does, it's probably because the economy has collapsed and demand is finished. So hang tight, guys. This season of The Apprentice is getting crazier with each episode, and we are still 4 years away from the finale. But let me know what you think. How will Canada respond? And do they really have any options left? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.